in the Mahayana teachings. Teba chumbi chula teba tembo kia chido karacha gures. Teba chumbi chula teba tembo kia chido karacha gures.
Oh, teba chumbi chula teba tembo kia chido karacha gures. Teba chumbo ki chiki payun di apo samgores. Gudang debu.
So to develop stable faith in the Mahayana Dharma, then you should think about how the Mahayana teachings benefit your mind. You know, what it causes within you, what sort of results it affects upon you, and that is how you are able to develop the faith in it.
So, 안에 장주급셈 장주 진주라송비 안에 장주급셈기 파연 진주류 담보되게 안에 장주급셈지 파연시야요. 어떤도 파연 마 로제 안에 파연 되더라. 삼로야보 다양소나 안에 대박이 온 그랬어.
And like when you read through the first chapter of the Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Bodhisattva Charivatara, and when you read the first chapter, within that first chapter, it talks of the incredible benefits of bodhicitta. And when you read about such benefits, and when you think about those benefits, those are some of the ways to inspire faith. What is the difference between pervasive suffering and nature of suffering? Dungel gi rangshin da kyaba duje gi dungel ni gi phasala kyaba khari yoresa. Hanzu chida dungel gi rangshin re se achora. Dida ya kyaba duje gi dungel se achora dungel suba.
Dunga gi rangshin se de ngarang zo wi ane se kho ne ma so so khare ti la lang che ne na ya. Ane khola 가서 라신지 대화지 매봐. 라신지 대화지 유인사나 아니 시점 아니 롱제장 아니 대화지 연거 원래 대매봐. 탈 아니 동화공 오주어 인자 아니 동화지 라신 시거레스.
When we talk about something being of the nature of suffering, then it relates to everything in the sense that everything in samsara, in the sense that whatever food we eat, whatever clothing we wear, wherever we live, that they are all not in the nature of true happiness. They're not actually in the nature of happiness. If all of these things that we that we have in life, if they were of true happiness or in the nature of pure or true happiness, then it would mean that however much you utilize them, your happiness would become greater and greater and greater and greater and greater. But it doesn't happen like that. Whatever you eat, whatever you wear, eventually then you run into problems or sufferings with regards to them. So
일단 네 가서 동아지랑 시세에 로변 파발라이 피신바이 아니 대화라 도바르 주와 치다고 대다 동아 패와라 도바 주와 매전에 소환하시 아니 나라도 아니 가 대화를 세기 내마 론지라더니 아니 대화 용그래 세지 대화디 아니 동아 칠지어 발라 대화랑 맞아 마도 아니 랑신지 아니 대화지 예서나 아니 대화디 세고 내마 치점 대장 아니 대화디야 권에 콘도 와시 어 텐다지 표 대화 권에 콘도 표 매바 드니야 동아공 오빠 주고 알아봐
So
동아종 모르지 또 주고 알아봐.
So what the great Indian master Arideva explains as being of the nature of our suffering is that what in our life what we know as happiness is only when obvious suffering is not there. When apparent suffering is not there, when very or when the degree of suffering is very low, then we think of it as happiness. Like with regards to our food, our clothing, shelter. As opposed to not having this, then having it is a pleasure. we associate, as opposed to not having clothing or not having housing, then having it is a happiness. But the fact that it is not true happiness, pure happiness, is denoted by the fact that the more and more we partake of these, then eventually it turns into suffering. The more and more we partake of these things which we associated as happiness, it doesn't in any way, increase our happiness to greater and greater levels. Instead, eventually, it becomes suffering in the end. So, as the great Aryadev states, saying that, what we know as happiness is a mere change of suffering. So therefore, no matter how much we partake of, causes of suffering, things that are in the nature of suffering, it can only be suffering. It cannot transform into happiness.
Oh, there is a doesn't it? Kasore, Tajishua Nashi Jenny, and then around to the Sajak so and the water of Ganga, Guri Tunga, Sigala. And then Guri Tunga, there are Mungu, and then Chisam, then you can let go or the junior, and Tunga or Pure in some Guri Tunga, Sigari.
So, as explained earlier, all are, contaminated feelings of happiness. What it is a mere change of suffering. And so therefore, no matter how much we partake of it, it in no way increases the happiness other than, transforming into the nature of more apparent suffering.
That's how do you do I think that Kadiji said, Tang
when we talk about the suffering of pervasive conditioning, then we are talking about these aggregates, these contaminated, appropriate aggregates, that are brought on by karma and delusions.
What do the candidates and a Kasashua Nashi Jenny, Leda Nyomong Wangachumi, then the Yana Junior Wangachumi, and in Yelenk Pumbote.
What are the causes of these aggregates? Excuse me, these contaminated, appropriated aggregates are the afflictions, delusions, and action karma that are subsumed within the 12 links.
That Terangamani, Jawangamagi, Pumbotiki Wangi, City Pumboti Drup, Rechimati. Momba Tributun, Druba Latin, Momba Tributun Sigala, that Pumboti Drudi, Druba Latene, that gave you to Maya, Pumboti Latene. Ani Gayu to Maya, Pumboti Latene. Never go on, now you do Maya, and Pumboti Latene. Chiwaya Pumboti Latena Yonga is that do not Tamjek Shishing Pumboti.
So these aggregates, the result of these, aggregates, which are which has been, which we have as a result of having had previous aggregates, our prior. Our aggregates of the previous lifetimes, then is what has brought the result of this present aggregates. So, this manifestly established aggregates, which is the very basis of the suffering, which, because of having these, manifestly established aggregates, so we have the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, and suffering of death. So these aggregates are the foundational basis of our suffering. So when we experience gross sufferings or suffering of change, meaning a happiness turning into a suffering. All of these sufferings, we experience because of having the basis of these aggregates, because of having this basis.
아니 코랑기 풍부 코랑기 오태양 가르치 실에서나 아니 내다 니몽그 왕그 충위 샤왕 내다 니몽그 아메도 충위 내년그 샤왕제지 풍부.
What is the nature of these aggregates? The nature of these aggregates is that it is completely under the control of afflictions and its action karma.
왜냐다 거의 동안에 내주제사데 다 가르래서나 사 된다지 사천 년이 풍부 차와도지 그 동아지 풍부되라 내주제고 얼마도 아니 동아랑 내주제 전로라요 아래 태양 동안에 타데 전로라야 예 송아리 반전에서 취지된 그러와
So when we talk about generating the renunciation of suffering, the thought to definitely to get out of this kind of suffering, it is in relation to these contaminated appropriate aggregates. It is in relation to this suffering of pervasive conditioning. It is in relation to this type of suffering that we need to generate a sense of definite emergence. A sense of renunciation should be directed towards the suffering of pervasive conditioning of these contaminated appropriate aggregates. To have the thought of a definite emergence with regards to gross suffering, that even animals, they also want to get out of gross suffering.
아니 대제라 사제 초원 내와라 이규 치료 와라야 치 사제 그 초원 내와라 니좀 이규 깨와데 아니 치료 와당 요아리 삼den기 심통경기 치료 와든잖아 요아리
And as for generating a sense of definite emergence, wanting to get out of the contaminated feelings of happiness, that kind of wanting to get out of even that is possible even in the case of non-Buddhists who engage in states of meditative concentrations or stabilizations. They are able to relate to that as well, to the want to get out of contaminated feelings of happiness.
근데 대제라 대나 사제 예렘비 차원 누지 동아라 말한저 그 사제 예왈렘비 안에 차원 누지 그 사제 풍부되라 동안 룹당 추바이 세가나 아니 테랑아마기 동안에 사제 예렘 풍부되라 때는 최대 동아지 풍부된 주바세야 되기 아니 최대 사제지 풍부될 랑발라 때는 다시 시와 나신전이 가와다 나와다 아니 치위 동안에서 주바 제가 나지 그 댄셔봐 최대 제가 나지 그 댄셔봐다 아니 가서 다시 시와 나신전이 아니 용아지 동아다 도유 동아지 시생에 코랑기 오야 동아기 오 인바 인상 다 풍부돼 내당 대당 수문 나신 딱 그래 내라 때는 동아 식사버 제와 내세데 수보라 마숑아 만만데 마라스가 대세 대당 아니 수문 나신 어디 풍부들 때는 제와래 수무 스팅 동아 미러 와라 수무 내다 대다 수무시
So and with regards to the suffering of the pervasive conditioning of these, contaminated appropriate aggregates, then this is, and this is an established suffering. It is an established suffering in the sense that this is the result of our past, common delusions that has established this suffering. These contaminated aggregates regarded as as an established form of suffering, and on top of that, besides it being an established form of suffering, and it is the basis for even more suffering in that, in the sense that because of having this present life, because of having this present contaminated aggregates, then it is the basis for this lifetime's, suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, like that. So not only is it a suffering result of the past, but it is the basis for all sufferings, of the gross sufferings, of the suffering of change. And so in every respect, these aggregates are like it's like the very nature of suffering. If you take it, it's like the disease, it's like the like the wound, like the abscess or the wound, and sumu is like what you call sumu. It's like la. It's like when you touch it there is pain, but when you don't touch it there's no pain. Sumu. It's like so like it's like the first one is like a obvious sickness or disease. The other is like a sore that you have. It's a problem, but it's not like the disease that's making you groan with pain. But it's like you have a sore there. But it's a problem, and then the other is even more subtle in the sense that you don't experience the pain until you touch it, kind of like that. So so it's in the very nature of suffering, from the most gross to the most subtle level, kind of like that.
Oh yeah, something called na qingyo churu chairil, right? Insan, that你就觉得。다 자체 년이 풍부되는 거 주적으로 마도 그 계획이 시디들이 어때서도 가나 다 삼중권의 증여 주르세요 가나 아니 가소래 다 대배리 강바 자산 배지 별급 강바라 다자의 지제 다 뒤셔셔 강바라 다자주 가나 아니야 강바 다 챙겨해
강가 접듯어
강바 제도 말이 강바 다자 챙겨 말이 저는
다스나
강바제디 가나
가와되게
동마 얘기 등마 되기 야 강바 쪼이나 아니 많이야 자기 가나 아니 쪼도 상고로 와 아니 지금 어떤 난신 전에 신이 당기 주제에 온 거여서 삼신권의 진요스.
Well, they use the example of in Tibet when you have houses and then you see a beam that is bending, and there's a danger of the roof collapsing. So when you use another sort of pillar to straighten out that beam, that analogy is utilized as, by reflecting on suffering, when you start generating the thought of definite emergence, which is to definitely to get out of suffering, that kind of renunciation. That is like the first starting point of setting up that pillar to straighten your life. So I'm joking.
어다디 내주제사기 시대 땅아란지 사자년이 풍부될 게고요래.
So the basis upon which you generate renunciation is by thinking about the suffering of pervasive conditioning of these contaminated appropriated aggregate.
아니 제와 시점 미국 견자부 가서 대단 대회 콤바년에니 제와 도빌레도 배바즈 전이 아니 루루기 자우되지 삼볼라 담반한지 전이 그와 로바타와 전다 투제장 아니 이단이다 냐와 제와다 자유감에 받아 타고다 제와 시점 미국 견자부 대당 차네 콤바 년년이 다 단족이 미군바 대당 차위 아니 단족이 댄상보지 년년 대당 제가 콤바 년년이 개원 도빌레도 배바즈 세가나 개와 가르서나 레니지 풍보티 레미고와기 이개와티 레니기 왕기 개와티 아니 도비치도 배고래 전에 겨우되지 삼보라 아니 누룩이 담아나신 전에 말한도다 텐다디 달 도고 하래다.
So just like how Nagarjuna wrote in his letter to a king, saying that when you have the opportunity of a perpetuum rebirth, which is blessed with those 8 freedoms, then while having such a good situation, such a good rebirth, then take every opportunity to reverse your birth under the control of karma and delusions. Means to take every opportunity to stop being born under the control of karma and delusions. So how does Buddha's Dhammakaya act as the governing condition for the acts of virtue performed by sentient beings, Buddhists and non-Buddhists, such as ourselves? Sangegi chukugi rwa, sangegi chukugi ken cheche simchen thamche nangba yimba nama yimba kanga like gewele ki kulmasroch kulbe ken che at condition goresa that sangegi chukugi di ken che dan condition goresa
chukugi ken che 추기 제세의 가래에서는 랑기줄라 개와 칸데시 지기에나에 개와테 개와기 다진도 주비 안에 산제기 추구를 요구래 균에 그봐 균에 지고이 그봐 개와 칸데시나야.
It is said that whatever virtue arises in sentient beings, whatever virtue arises in us, then there has to be a main condition for that virtue to arise, and so the indirect cause is always attributed to the Dhammakaya of the Buddha as being that condition.
다주야가 셔바나신 전이 아니 개외 신예의 예전바나신 전이 아니 개외 신예 그 최대네 랑기줄라 아니 개심 개와기 아니 셈 개와티잖아 텐다와기 아니 가서래 개심제기 다진데 아니 개외심 신이기 아니 쉐다발했다네 제거하래.
As explained earlier, due to the teachings of your virtuous friend, your gurus, then it gives it generates a virtuous mind within us. So, what is the main condition for this virtuous mind to arise in us is the teachings of your virtuous friend.
대양 안에 산제기 아니 chen 가서에 칠레 산제기 똑지 껴와 로아 산제기 칠레기 똑지 이시 아니 고랑거 줄라야 당아 튼두니에 당아 튼두니에다 신이 티게야 안에 가래서나 아니 당아 튼두니에가 되라 아니 가서래 당아 치지 말아 봤대 산제기 칠레기 똑지 중앙이장 대한 이시축 칠레게 있을까요?
So for us to be able to generate the interest in those teachings, for the virtuous friend, for the gurus to be able to give you these unmistaken teachings, are all empowered by the pure activities of the Buddha. So, is it possible to develop disgust for samsara without purifications of obstacles to renunciation? Koala kasure kyoshe nyenjula nyenjunkiala 파도 줘야 된서 파 매번 마수베 고네 콜라 교셰스야 용구르베사
맞지.
시다 년중기야라 다 파체요라 디파 파체든도 매번 마수베 고네라 콜라 교셰기야 주요르에사
파도 줘봐 자와 매번 마수방 콜라 지식이에요. 왕의 준지. 파도 줘봐 그 자와데 매번 마수봐. 파도 그 자와데 마수봐 지당의 준지에 용구르에서와 아주 때는 이 용구르.
파주드니
파도 줘봐 세다. 파도 주지 그 자와지체. 내가 의준지와라 파도 지에주 이 용구르와.
When we talk about like purification or getting rid of obstacles, obstacles can be like removal of obstacles from its very root, or a temporary form of a removal of obstacle.
This word
this word I don't, and it's like the first and the second part of the question is a little bit funny. I think without renunciation. Whose question? It's like, can I say without renunciation? Is it possible to discuss for samsara without purification of obstacles to renunciation? Okay, gone. Why then? Why are they called the four wheels? 단지 갱수야 택초 콜로시 수야 좋아 콜로시 같은 순교였어. 다 콜로시 택초
콜로시 가에서나다 릭생게 땡들라 아니 전지 고고 아래 스티조 콜로시다 담아지. 야. 땡데 토발라 땡네 아니 가서래 릭세디. 땡 텐데지리디 가나 아니 땡기 튠견 삼비 가나 아니 릭데디 니와디야 세디 가나 아니 콘도 페디 아니 또바지레지 연구하래.
Why are they called the four wheels? They are wheels in the sense that they bring forth the awakening of our Buddha lineage in us. These four wheels are basically conducive conditions that enable the ripening of the potency of our Buddha lineage.
Yeah. 다 다중이 거하려고 어제체. 사치당 이렇게 해야 되라. 아니 투바춘비 이렇게 해야 되라. 이렇게 해야 돼. 인지 전부 교환에 이렇게 교환해.
When we talk about the awakening of a Mahayana lineage, means when one generates great compassion, then one has awakened your Mahayana lineage.
로세제 땡용수 냥알라 메다와 동겐 대기야. 내가 인지 전부 기회 가진 파자단 되나야. 아니 림베 신도 아니 인지 전부 기회가 그 튕제 상화지 연구하래.
Even someone who is totally engaged in a wrong form, in a wrong way, in a deluded way, a wrong way, like that, it's just it's just a temporary case. In due course of time, then gradually there will be an occasion when they are able to generate great compassion and awaken that Buddha lineage.
인장 일세바게 따되라. 아니 조용원도 인제다. 매화탄의 서바탕. 게라 양다 조원이 릭시다 릭기다 수셰와차 전에 아니 도대 gen게 가라 송하나 신이체니. 조용원도 인제세가 창주의 세무권비 조와. 아니 조와라 인지 전부제 인지 전부제와다 릭세바이만 인지 전부제와 직체.
So what are the signs of having awakened that lineage in oneself? It says that the great the great compassion is like a preliminary factor to or to awakening that kind of the great compassion is a preliminary factor to generating the actual bodhicitta.
then 가서래 티바 쳔비 최와라 때네 아니 랑기 가서래 티바 쳔비 최니 아니 녜라 코와 지치라 그 동아산이 코유 동안에 코유 동안에 이규지 맞은 예주지 맞게 봐라 아니 인지 좀 제거나요 말에
like first you have to have the opportunity of hearing the Mahayana teachings. Upon hearing those teachings, then you reflect upon the sufferings of samsara in terms of the general sufferings of samsara and the particular types of sufferings of samsara in relation to the different realms of existence. And on the basis of these contemplations, then you generate renunciation. So without generating first and foremost this renunciation, the thought of definite emergence from the entire suffering of samsaric existence, there is no way one can generate compassion. So when one reflects on suffering in terms of one's own suffering and feels unbearable about one's own samsaric suffering, and having well ascertained this, then when one sort of translates this in terms of others' suffering, then only one can feel unbearable for the sufferings of others, because one already knows how unbearable the suffering of samsara is in one's own case. So when one has totally conceived this, then when one applies it to the case of others, then one you have the basis, the grounds to feel unbearable for the sufferings of others. And so this is what constitutes compassion, and generating that kind of compassion is what is regarded as the sign of having awakened your Mahayana lineage.
Teni tiba chimbi chola mewa shechewa. Kase mewa tani sabatang se kala. Ani tiba chimbi judan dewi ani chola mewi ani mewa shechewa.
And so the second sign of having awakened your Mahayana lineage is your aspiration or devotion to the Mahayana teachings, the causes and results of the Mahayana path, or Mahayana teachings that explain the causes and results, and having great devotion or aspiration. And the third sign of having awakened that lineage is the forbearance or the tolerance.
아니 전에도 아니 동아 서바게 서바체와 되나 메와탄이 서바탕.
The third tolerance is being very forbearing, being very tolerant of all the sufferings and hardships in the fulfillment of the benefit of others.
gelayangda jowa니 세가나 아니 짐발라 소위 타진지 파로르 집이 냠년지 개와라 양다바 조르자바 어디 다시 제시오데 이르사베다 도대견의 손에 두스인 말.
And the fourth sign of having awakened one's Mahayana lineage is being someone who is perfectly engaged in virtue, purely engaged in virtue, such as the six perfections in generosity, ethics, well engaged in such acts of virtue. So these are the four signs of having awakened one's Mahayana lineage, as explained in the jewel ornament of the sutras.
tenderly, and it's a one you chimping, yelling, do chane, and it's to Java some young to do, and a casore, Sanja combat Tom Degi, Sem Gedi, and a Sem Della, and a Noah, so making Noah Tabana, and a Chanjuk Sem Gevada, and a Rani Tiba Chibi tried to say, I do think I told them to
when the roots of such a compassion, becomes the substantial cause for generating the mind to attain enlightenment solely for the welfare of others. And when such a mind is generated to a degree at which it requires no effort, kind of uncontrived, wish to attain enlightenment for the welfare of others, then you can say that you have generated, you have been born into the Mahayana lineage, not just awakened, but you are, you are born into the Mahayana lineage.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Nega lost a ten element. Nega rich about some mado, and a tar, and a casore, Tubachibi, Rijan Imba, Rick Sete, and a Nichabo Geroma, Imbari.
So, for those who are, engaged in kind of wrong or very delusional ways, are temporarily experiencing a severance of the lineage, but even though they experiencing a temporary severance of lineage, it is not like they are without that lineage. They are still endowed with that lineage, and so therefore, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time before, when all the conditions come together, that they can give rise to the mind of great compassion and awaken that Mahayana lineage in them. So therefore, we would say that ultimately, then there is only one vehicle.
Kasan Kondo Shuana Cheni, Tadu Tibasum to Truasuma, Lanam Bayanda Basoya Sanje, Tober Gua Yina, Benita to the Gond, Yadon Binagala. Kanyanda Bajame Bala Shua Tedani, Lanam Bayanda Basoya Sanje Command, Tobaki, and a tap medes. Koyuji some Jebby Chill, Sicheni, Digi, Tadu Tibasum to Truasuma. Kayana, Nyandugi. Nyandu ring a Kansate, and Lanam Bayanda to Saji Komatobaki, and the Tagua Maris. Mea Carresana, Kasanyage, Hatek, Kuana, Jenny, Drajum Tobachetana, and el Hamedu Nyan Delcana, Riba Junchava. Riba Junchava in that teaching Lama Jue for a Meva in the Tadu Tiba to the Trua. Roma, Dodo Conde Sumbari, Roma, Dodo Conde, the Dicas of Tadu Tiba to the Truba Sumba ready. Sumba ready, did you soon ready? Dodi, do Koran Tandu in by the door market take you are in the Yeton Bagi, Chedu Chavi, Duja Tela, Tadu Tubasum to Truba, then Gresaki to Jamari.
So here in the presentation of ultimately there is one vehicle, and then you have, in accordance with the Sutra Alankara, then that there is ultimately three vehicles. And so therefore, from the perspective of the presentation of there being ultimately three vehicles, then it is said that the arhants who are engaged in purity or in perfection, then have no occasion to attain, have no opportunity to attain the unsurpassable, perfect and complete state of enlightenment, because once they attain that state of arhat, in which they have attained the liberation without remainder, then the continuum of the mind or the lineage is cut off, and so there is no way that they can become that they can ever attain the perfect state of enlightenment. So such statements of designating ultimately that there are three vehicles, as stated within the ornament of the sutras, it is said to be interpretive. In the disciples following like the Prajna Paramita, 8,000 stanzas, Prajna Paramita, perfection of wisdom sutras, then there is no disciples for the three vehicles. So in the Sutra Alankara, Dode Gontena.
Dode Gonte Tempare. Tautos supposed to try
or Dode Gonte or
Santa Di Gausuyan, Tautos to try Tempare de soon you are the Domagi di Tande but Digori.
Sorry, not Sutra Alankara, but the Sutra unraveling the intention of the Buddha, Shantinivajana Sutra. Within that, it says that ultimately there are three vehicles. But other sutras showed that this Shantinivajana Sutra is an interpretive sutra. And that in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra of that has the 8,000 stanzas, then it does not designate disciples who are, disciples of the three ultimate vehicles.
Minda Chabago Diare di Yadonbagi Cheducha Dujatela Tadu Tibasum to Trakel get down.
So 8,000 verses Prajna Paramita Sutra does not accept disciples, for the three, for ultimately the three vehicles, does not accept that.
Yedan Yadonbe Tadu Tibasum to Tratigi Chig Chang Yimbadi Domati Digor, Domati Kariwaresana, Kadi Tedaki, Lana Meba Yandaba, Zoe Changju to Semgena, Koyu Jesu Iran Chow, Domatera. Kadi Teda Sanatanda, Kuji Samjabara Singedi, or Shivaji was a tenderly, Lana Meba Yandaba, Zoe Changju to Semgena, Koyu Jesu Iran Chow, Sagi. Naman do de Tande to Digori. And I'm by Antabach to Meadow said.
So, why does the 8,000 versed Prajna Paramita Sutra does not accept disciples of the ultimately three vehicles? Is because these words or statements of the ultimately three vehicles are regarded as interpretive in accordance with the later or sutras, on the authority of later sutras. Then they have taken that these statements are interpretive statements because in the cases of those who have attained liberation, when the other sutras, what it says is that in the case of those who have attained liberation out of samsara, and when they generate the altruism to attain the unsurpassed, perfect and complete state of enlightenment, when they give rise to such a mind, then this is something to rejoice about. And so therefore it says, these statements as contained within other sutras then show that these statements as ultimately three vehicles are something interpretive.
다 대다 시라 좀들어 다 간제 가래에서나 타도 티바 숨도 주바 숨하기 좀 된다지 노여바티 노여나양 노데 다 공시 고와 다 텐지 그 공시당 고와 그 관에 아니 뭐 숨바디 뭐위체 말에 안 다치 심바 말에 대 아니 장들에 전에 다 공시관에 장된 지거래
So the sutras that speak about the ultimately three vehicles, then there's a meaning for making such a statement. There's a purpose for such a statement, and that and therefore you cannot accept it literally, and should take the should be understood in its interpretive context.
얘가 공시 거와 아니 가서 뭐라 이제 담바나시 요아되지나 거라 아니 내가 요아 전에 다 두스한테 되거래 공시 거와 뭐라 이제 숨지고네 단지 되거래
what what defines a sutra as being interpretive is when there's when there is an underlying meaning, when there is a certain purpose for stating it in such a way, and when it kind of harms what the actual situation is, what the reality is, when it is harmful to what the reality is.
일단 녹망볼에 아니 로세전 대양수 양알에 미대비 최전 세가라. 그러면 로세제 대양의 미대비 진 최전 세대비 아니 송바에다 대당 안에 가기도 우스나 어때다 송요한테 송바 가르래서나 된다와디 튜바 준비 쳐라 당와 아니 타발라 잡지 초위 아니 로바 코알라 아니 세바 코알라 세바기 아니 대자음 세바 톱chen 톱chen 콘에 콘도 펴와 아니 젠 대다기 아니와 젠지 주의비 칠서 된다라 인장 대다라 단 내가 버릴라 된다 가르로 세나 대다라 권에 아니 숨바레스 대안이 하든
로스젠
로스젠 로스젠 세나
so in the sutras when it talks about those who are like engaged in a completely wrong way, in a completely kind of deluded or evil or wrong way.
대다로 권에 로스젠 대다그라 권에 아치라 당와잖아. 내 타바타바 민주로
it's because why they are like that is because they have they have an attitude that is which is hostile towards the minor teachings, that they turn their back on liberation, and they have much craving or obsession or attachment to samsaric existence, having very powerful mindset with worldly existence, and due to these causes, then temporarily they are like so wholly engaged in evil or in wrong ways.
다 그와 가르래서나 원시 대략해 가서 대략송바체 그와 가르쳐도 송바래서나 다 로세전 대다기 투바 준비 쳐라 당와데 도비텐도 아니 송아데
And so what is what is tanda tadu teba sunyat smwere. So when we talk about there being ultimately three vehicles, it's for the benefit of such individuals, of such mindset. And what is the purpose for saying so is that in order to sort of not to make them so hostile towards the minor dharma.
타도 대바수도 주바송에 대당도 아니래 이게 로세제 대양도 미 대양을 민다와스 로비 세바제 냥데 토고 말에
So,
손에
such individuals who are so, wrongly engaged, when we say that such individuals can never attain liberation, when, and can just see, I'm just there. That loss of chain, that.
loss of chain, young let there togo marry soon at togo member somebody carriers go walk carry to somebody, the teaching with chela, down topic to somebody. Why such a statement is made about them that such individuals who are so wrongly engaged will never attain liberation? What is the purpose of such a statement? Is so that they are not so hostile towards the Maya Dharma. 공시 가르래서 가르를 권해 somebody에서나 뒤이름으로 아까와 탈렌데발 아니 코를 참신 아니 타바 믿어 봐라 권해 자원에 타바 못 봐서 타바 타바라 뒤이름으로 고디 가외 파도 아니 가서 코를 참대 아니 타바 믿어 봐라 권해 아니 로세제 대양수 양알에 민다와 소양 대리.
So what is the sort of the underlying meaning to saying that such wrongly engaged individuals will never attain liberation? What is the underlying meaning to that? Is saying the underlying meaning to is that that they will be roaming in samsara for a very, very long time. It's not saying that they will never attain liberation. It's not that, but like it'll take a really long time to attain liberation because they're going to be roaming in samsara for a very long time. That is the intention behind that statement. So there are like 7 underlying meanings for stating that there are ultimately 3 vehicles, but we are not going to go through all the 7.
난 가서래 공대수부 그와 공시 제와 대승이 되라 내지 땜바 써야 되겠다. 대승이 되라 내지 땜바 써야 돼. 다 심장 가양, 심장 강가양 안에 루부지 치면 넘버 타바 민주와 상제 토바 미스반이 여봐 마인데. 와 심지어 간듯이 이나양 루부지 치면 넘버 타바 민주와다 상제 톱 미스반이 여봐 마인데.
So then the next is to say that some sentient beings will never be able to purify their adventitious defilements, and that they have no capacity to attain enlightenment. So what is the harm in such statements? What is the harm in accepting such statements literally?
심지어 가양 안에 루부지 치면 넘버 타바 민주와 상제 톱 미스반이 여봐 많이 돼.
So stating that there will be harm in the literal acceptance of such statements, as in which you say that there are sentient beings who will not be able to purify the adventitious defilements, and that impossible to say that impossible for them to attain Buddhahood.
만일에 가르에서는 따슴제 탐제라 라신나바타바 라신에리 여와탕 아니 양다발랑 와라 주위 아니 견주기 니가 여와 인상 아니 산제 톰미서바디 여와 마이레.
So you cannot it could not be it could never be impossible for sentient beings to attain Buddhahood, because all sentient beings by nature are pure. They have the natural purity, and that and they have the capacity to adopt what is virtue, what is perfect, what is pure, because they have that developmental Buddha nature.
다 심지어 탐제 심지어 건드지 이나야 최면 남바 타바 민주와당 산제 토바 미세바 여바 많이 시리 가나 많이나 아니 심지어 탐제 가소래 상제바 여바당 심지어 탐제 그 처마 타바 여바 여고래 다들라 가를 제바치에자
So so then because of such a statement, then you would have to say that sentient beings, whoever they may be, then it's possible for them to experience the purification of defilements, and to and to attain Buddhahood. Because you said because of the previous statement, we said that there's no sentient being who would not attain Buddhahood, or who would not be able to purify. So then by this, then what is to be investigated, that that sentient beings can attain Buddhahood and can attain the purification of defilements. So this is the thing to investigate.
that condition 심지어 탐제 산제 토 미세바 여바 마이나 아니 심지어 탐제 그 산제 토바 시고래 심지어 탐제 그 산제 토바 시고래
Since it's said that it's impossible that sentient beings would not attain enlightenment, so the conclusion would have to be that that it is possible for all sentient beings to attain enlightenment.
아니 심지어 탐제 그 산제 토바 시나 아니 산제 치마 대달라 아니 산제 치마 대달라 심지어 탐 산제 치마 대달라 아니 심지어 윤셰 바시기 아니 전점 쳐고래 심지어 윤셰지 전부 전쳐고와 인장 아니 현재 이제와 죽으래.
So then it's saying that since all sentient beings has the possibility for attaining Buddhahood, then it would mean that future Buddhas, who are becoming Buddhas towards the end, then they have to work for very few sentient beings to benefit. So like their activity of benefiting sentient beings it's going to be a partial, limited.
현재 이제와 주와 마세다 현재 이제와 주와 인당 아니 소남당 아니 소남 그 소용수 좋아야 매고 그래 산제 치마되잖아.
So for those latter Buddhas or future Buddhas, then because of partaking of just benefiting a small amount, like limited benefit for sentient beings, so it would not be possible for them to complete the accumulation of the merit of virtue.
다들이 심지에 디나니다 심지에 탐제 산제비 채나 아니 심지에 지그양 되미세배 아니 산제 그 현재 처벌 유체 그래.
So if all sentient beings are going to become enlightened, a statement like Buddhas are continuously engaged in the activities benefiting sentient beings, that Buddhas would not be such means that they are not benefiting one sentient being. These kind of state, there will be like a break in that continuity of that activity of the Buddha. If all sentient beings become enlightened, then you would have to say that there's a break in the continuity of the Buddha's benefiting sentient beings, if benefiting even one sentient being.
现在觉察不觉醒，现在觉察呢，俺那习为他从啊，习在几把。
So if there is a severance in the continuity of benefiting others, then you fall into the extreme of you fall into the extreme of peace.
他讲人家他们这三界托把没事呢，托把身呢，他在这当儿吧。人家他们这三界托把没事呢，俺那杨大伯作为三界那么的，俺那让你的杨大伯作为他们这让你给俺那三界去捆绑业为捆绑太了，俺那人家他们这国把闲呢，对，人家他就国把闲呢，俺那国其实。코 치세 마동게 파도 아니 제바 중니지 권 제바 중니지 추지 아니 최지 코로 꼬와텔라 저음에 바차 그래.
And then if you say, so the previous statement was if all sentient beings become enlightened. Now the next is if all sentient beings didn't become enlightened, if all sentient beings if all sentiments didn't become enlightened or impossible that all sentient beings became enlightened, then what this statement would contradict is that those who attain the perfect and complete state of enlightenment, and those who have attained that state and who have generated the wish to place all sentient beings in that state of enlightenment, and that they will remain in samsara until samsara is no more, enacting those 12 deeds, turning the wheel of Dharma, would all be rendered meaningless if by the statement that all sentient beings would not become enlightened or impossible to become enlightened. So then, those who do become Buddhas and who have those aspirations to remain in samsara until it becomes empty, and engage in the 12 days and turn the wheel of Dharma, those become meaningless.
주와상 양 선제 탐제 아니 동안 여러 시위 니시담 텐도 냐와 양 아니 양 선제 탐제 산제 요코마 텐도 냐와 마이바 아니 차와 타진 동안 아주 감미수와 나싱제리 차와 두제기 동안 여러 시위 니시 텐도 냐와데 아니 텐다와데니 티바치비 이지치비 천용수 마조와레 조마레.
So then if you say the objective is to pacify suffering, attain the total pacification of suffering, meaning overcome the suffering of pervasive conditioning that we talked about before, if you sort of explain it away in that kind of context, then it makes use, it does not fulfill the aspirations of the Mahayana's great compassion.
찬조와 말이 가르에서나 좀 된데 라니지 니위 아니 녀무바다 시지 드바 세바르 빵바기 공방 텔라 생제 먹거나 아니 차와두지 그동안 녀와시위 니시 잠라고 아니 녀모 탐지 녀무바다 시지 드바 세바르 빵비 아니 동아 가서 산제 공방텔라 아니 산제기 생제 먹거나 아니 가서를 쳐라 빈지시 여바타와 교당하래 쳐라 빈지 쳐라 빈지세나 쳐배 강감 맞täm바
알레
쳐라 빈지 쳐봐세노 그런 최천이 쳐라 빈지 쳐봐.
So to place sentient beings only in a state of total pacification of suffering, removal of only the suffering of pervasive conditioning, does not fulfill the characteristics of what the great compassion is all about. And furthermore, for the Bhagwan, the fully and complete Buddha, who has attained the exhaustion and the abandonment of the two obscurations, the obscuration of afflictions and obscuration to knowledge, if they only fulfilled the benefit of sentient beings only at that level of removing sentient beings suffering of pervasive conditioning alone, and if they didn't, sort of place all sentient beings in that state of perfect enlightenment, since the Buddhas themselves, have that attainment of having overcome the obscuration of afflictions, obscuration of knowledge, obscuration to omniscience, since they have those attainments, and if they didn't place all sentient beings or place or lead sentient beings to that level, but only at a level of abandoning the suffering of pervasive conditioning, then it would be a shortcoming on their part of, giving only partial dharma.
Oh yeah, that didn't. Senjen 탐제 아니 가서로 호유 동안 여러 시비 니시 톱누나 아니 타도 특바지도 주바 레바 주그래 아주 이렇게 semjen 매봐 senjen 탐제 아니 가서 태원 동안 태와도 저 동안 여러 시비 니시 톱누나 아니 텔라 때네 타도 특바지도 주바 타도 특바지도 주바양 아니 산제 톱바대양 대이 르바 텔라 때네 뱀에도 주그래
So to say that all sentient beings then attain the total pacification of suffering of pervasive conditioning, the suffering of samsara, that statement also fulfills the statement of that there is ultimately one one vehicle. It's kind of establishes that view of ultimately there being only one vehicle. And so if you assert that ultimately that there is only one vehicle, then also this would also be met with effortlessly establish that it would this state by this statement that establishing that ultimately there is only one vehicle, then this statement would effortlessly establish that eventually everyone's going to attain Buddhahood. Sangye thoba bemed dugures.
Sangye khasore. Sangye thoba ya bemed dugures.
Without effort, it would establish the attainment of Buddhahood.
Ta tabadan thoba misibi semjen yena. Ta tendra yoba sonwa de ani drachi simba mayin bada. Ani tendra de gongxi xian la gongne songba. Ani lobe paba nunda riben ruba dang gaiwe da teni yo da chida yin jo goxing da toba langguare riba
taba gode kansuba
taba tam tomisi bi semje yuena
misifa
ani yoba somba de ani kaso drachi simba mimbi gongba jandu
taba tam tobe
semje yoba somba de drachi simba mayimba gi ani gongba jandu ani lobe 파벨 제바레스 로빈 파벨 lun다 리베트바레스 로베 누두키 송이지레
타바점 토베스메
타바다 톰미시피
라
타바점 톰미시.
So any statement which says that there are sentient beings who are not able to attain even just liberation, these statements then means that it cannot be taken literally. There's a meaning behind such making such statements, and as the great Lubin Susuma, Lubin Papala,
Lubin Papa, Lubin Ludwig,
Ludu Naga, what Lubin Ludu? Nagarjuna states scriptural authority and reasonings to say that you cannot take these statements literally. that there is a underlying meaning for such statements.
다섬제 탐제 산제 토바 시나 아니 코알라 탐메바 샤바 미다바 주로 시나 다디 토바디야 랑샤니 아 주시나 다디라 아니 현지 루가바다 랑루 남바샤바 니용고아리 산요도 뭐부터 다데마
랑기 루샤와
아나도 네 산제 섬제 탐제 산제 토바 시나 아니 코알라 탐메바 샤바디 미다바 주고레스
코알라 타
탐메바 샤바
never. So then, the next part brings up a lot of questions, like saying, if you make a statement like, that all sentient beings are going to, attain enlightenment, and that all sentient beings will attain enlightenment, then, with regards to such a statement, then there are questions that are brought up. Then does this mean that, that there is an end to samsara?
Tameba shaba.
Tameba. Tameba.
Tameba. Kuala tayoba da tameba.
So then, if usually we talk about endless samsara, is the samsara being endless. But if you say that all sentient beings are going to become enlightened, then then you're saying that there is an end to samsara, and usually we talk about samsara being endless or something like that. So then with regards to these types of statements, then there's a presentation of what your view is, our system and the other systems with regards to these types of statements.
Koala tasna kandisgore esna koala tome tadang tame tas niware.
So when we talk about the limit of samsara, there is a limit of the beginning and there is a limit of the end, with regards to samsara. Sorry, I made a major mistake. Major mistake. The samsara has two ends, two limits. The beginner's limit, the beginner's limit, and the limit of the end.
토메타스나 나란족의 랭이지 풍부대 가져지는 중화래에서나 아니 토마 가져지나 중화래에 딘데지나 중화래에서 타단이 매와 인장 토메타 메세테리.
So when we talk about when did our aggregates of brought on by karma and delusions, when did it start? If we question that, then you can never point to a beginning and say it began at this stage. So it's there is no limit of the beginning. It's like a beginningless.
나란주 풍복하기 나네 수지 풍복되다 체디기 수지 풍복돼 안에 체도 많이 나도 인자 자만에 죽고 알아와.
Our aggregate of form, aggregate of form of this body then began when we were conceived in our mother's womb.
다 풍복하기 나네 초유 풍복, 두시 풍복, 남시 풍복, 민시 풍복돼 초원 두시 두시 남바시 풍복 시오돼 다 고가르서 링랑아망아마 저와 체디 민시 풍복돼 토마 줘야 돼 아니랑 그 교왕아마디 제 민시바 링라마 주마 체도 용디 가나 링라를 막 먼저 손대 가나 다 토마데 같이 주바래서나 주배게 타요 말이야.
So, with the aggregate of form, you can say, this present aggregate form began when we were conceived in our mother's womb. But when we talk about the remaining aggregates, the aggregate of feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, the volition, consciousness, when you take the link of name and form, form began in the mother's womb, the link of name, which constitutes the remaining 4 aggregates, that, you have to say it came from the previous, and that one came from the previous of that one came from the prior of that. And so when we retrace backwards, then you cannot point to a beginning and say, so that link of name is beginningless.
yueba shingeji dang tameta meba shingeji gi sungdang mira ni yuare de tanda papsa jira paguare 장군은 정가와 전복이 아니 레제 설지 팀이 나가서 아니 토메타 매바 송아래.
So as for the end of samsara, then there are two versions. Some who accept there is an end to samsara, and some who assert that there is no end to samsara. So Lama Tsongkhapa in his writings known as Leksha Sergitawa, the jewel garland of excellence, excellent things. Within that, Lama Tsongkhapa's view is that there is no end to samsara. No end to samsara.
야자 림보체기 손대잖아. 아니 타메타 요와선 거래.
And then
장고는 정어지고 공부 레고 할때
Gyaltsen Rinpoche states that there is an end to samsara, but even though you have two different versions of the end of samsara, in meaning they will come down to the same thing. That's the main thing. Even though you have Lama Tsongkhapa saying one thing and Gyaltsen Rinpoche saying that, in meaning they will come down to the same point.
That tamata yusunga 가르에서나 나란주 주지 내니지 왕기 풍보대 세비타 요아레서나 다 풍보대 세비타 요아레 풍보대 세비 그때 가르에서나 다 가슴에 주와이바 사비 토반 사비 통다 예매바 미스반이 치다 통 내지 사변되지나 내지 사변데 rinda 유용하면 간이 중화래서나 아니 든든히 중화서 제요와 말에데 사변데 메이스 바티나 사변데 그 치다 통하래. 그봐 치다 통화. 대배라지.
So in the case of those who say that there is an end to samsara, it is in the context of that there is an end to these aggregates that are brought on by afflictions and disaction karma. These such aggregates brought on by karma and delusions can be totally exhausted. If you take like the the grain, seed, the grain. If you ask if you ask when did the seed begin, there is no beginning to it, but there is an end to that seed. When you burn that seed, then that's the end of that seed.
답배 대신도 아니 사전예내지 풍부 코와 그 친다 가져 통거래서나 아니 코를 깨와내지 그주 당신 말을 바기 아니 현유매 봐 다음에 무슨도 통화라 때네 아니 다음에 무슨도 또 이시에 탑단 제가 건배 탈 아니 가져서나 두 당신 말을 배 세배 아니 대부 차와도 지그 동안 세배 세바도 줘요.
So just like this example, then our aggregates, contaminated, appropriate aggregates, has an end to it. It has an end to it when the causes for it, when the causes of these aggregates, when the causes for the cyclic existence, the ignorance grasping at the self, when the object of this grasping of the ignorance, when you realize that it does not exist, and in this way realize directly the emptiness, realize directly the selflessness, and when you meditate on this, together with the support of the method, then there will come a time when you totally exhaust this ignorance of grasping at the self. And when one does this, then one comes to exhaust the suffering of pervasive conditioning.
And 인상 간들에서나 나란지 사자녀의 풍보대 아니 되게 이렇게 치마 세비 세바 요바데 가려도 균자를 로고래서나 풍보대 깨지기 주 당신 말을 받달라 년보 덤된 예배 그 당신 년보 덤된데 그 당신 말을 받은 주전 당신 말을 받 준비 아니면 대부 사자녀의 풍보대 좀 아니 좀 그래서
So therefore, the continuum of these aggregates, contaminated aggregates, can be severed because one can generate the powerful antidotes that can cause the severance of the continuum of these aggregates. So when those powerful antidotes, cause the severance of the continuum of these aggregates, then you no longer have those aggregates. Just asking. Was that okay? And I said, I told them something.
When this was when 가서래 장위 대부 남 차니 아니 라라 장대 불롱 장위 대부 불롱지 줘라 장대 불롱지데 세비 예지기 주 장위리자 장위리자데 장위리자 되라 좀지기 년보 차위리자 dom된 예배 차위리자 되기 아니 장위리자 준비 주 장위리자 dom바 준바 인상 장위리자 되라 때네 장대 불롱지데 좀 그래요.
So the example that is used to illustrate this point is like when you're very cold, you have all these things that stand up on your body, all the, what do you call, the hair and the little goosebumps, because you're so cold. But there is an antidote to this, which is the heat. So with the powerful antidote of the heat, then you destroy the experience of all your expression of cold. It's just like that example, how the powerful antidotes then can totally cut off that continuum of those aggregates, contaminated aggregates. So because there is an end in the way of exhausting these contaminated, appropriated aggregates, so you will say that there is an end to samsaric existence. 타요 등에 탐매당 타요 등에 다 되게 나나 내가 라누 좀 전에 연구 등에 어떤다 탐매서 로 대지 쉬어를 만든다 신이 다 된다지 타요 순간에 대라 가바다에 아니 탐매랑 그 가서 탐매바 되는 게 현루 가야 이 특성의 이 센줄을 송바디 장고나마 정거 집송나 송바디 가게와래 특성이라고 So then, and this was just a general kind of explanation of with regards to points of view, or saying that there is the end, that there is an end to samsaric existence, and then you have in the case of those others' viewpoint who say that there is no end to samsaric existence, then how to negate those viewpoints. So this point comes again. So what was just explained was just Rumchi's general explanation.
다 전다데 다도 순고래 다 하나야 유수다 다 같이 탐 매바 동간진주 간지송과레에서 섬전 탐제라 상제바 창장에와 다쇼 창자룬 자면 두고 말해서 타요 동간디 섬전 탐제 상자룬인 섬전 탐제 창자와레 상자와 상자와리 상장어리 라고와 다딜이 탐매바 동간디 섬전 탐제 창자와 다쇼 창자룬 자면 두고 말해서.
So for those who make the statement that there is an end to samsaric existence is on the grounds that all sentient beings will attain enlightenment, that they have they have the possibility for that. It's on those grounds that they say that there is an end to samsaric existence. And then for those who say that there is no end to samsaric existence, they say forget about sentient beings attaining enlightenment. They don't have the possibility for that.
주민과 가래에서는 대부기름 주발라 귀 초바 따수고 고거라. 삼제 대부기름 주디가라 안에 대우디 깨와 귀 초바 따수 귀 초바 상와 따수고 그래.
Because to say that sentient to say that someone if to say that something is has the capacity or the possibility for such a result, then you must have all the causes there. You cannot say that this entity has the capacity or the possibility for all this result without the causes. So I love it.
Oh yeah. 다 지시들이 대샤문도 다 제가 다
So I was just fed up of explaining it to me, so he's saying he's going to stop now. I'm just joking. Okay.
Guru Ratna Mandala Kanya Dayami Chanju Senjo Rinpoche Make Bana Jejo Jewa Nyamba Meba Ya Gone Pewa Jo Kare Rave Goye Shenga De Bendan Dewa Mali Jo Jere Se Wang Denzen Jazu De Chebe Sidi Padu Tenju Je Juzun Lama Guze Razen Je Nangatil Basan Bedu Me Sason Bedu Me Je Dazu Ne Juru Je Chembe Boyu Che Da Chemba Da Gundo Sambo Se Yang Tishi Te Da Gunji Jisu Ta Kewa Dida Tamje Radu Ngo Duzun Shive Jawa Tamje Ngo Kana Chodo Ngo De Dagi Keve Sambo Jeje Radu Ngo Wa De Chuje Jawa Zonga Ye Cheje Namba Bewada Na Junje Male Sawa Sho Dada Shenji Tisun Dan Debe Sonye La Dene Jawa Los Demba Yurin Ba Yu There's a trouble you are is. The report to that. There's a trouble you are.
I'm just saying this section is a little bit hard. All the logics that they use in this section is a little bit hard. The main thing being established is that all sentient beings can become enlightened. That's the whole thing. And you don't leave because there's going to be some explanation with regards to tomorrow's long life puja.